Imagine just for a second turning a handful of spare pennies into solid gold coins. And I don't mean with magic, but with actual rigorous math. Welcome to today's Explainer. We are diving headfirst into a wildly fascinating theoretical paper by independent researcher Gautam. His work takes static classical mechanics, the traditional way we've always viewed forces in matter, and completely flips it on its head. He's proposing a literal mathematical blueprint for elemental transmutation. Yes, we are talking about theoretically reconfiguring copper into gold. It is an absolute mind-bender of a concept, so let's just jump right in.
So here is our roadmap for today. First, matter's hidden tug-of-war. Second, inside the quantum vacuum. Third, building the structural backbone. Fourth, turning copper into gold. Fifth, the transmutation mechanism. And finally, a new energetic paradigm.
All right, let's start with part 1, matter's hidden tug-of-war. Now, before we can even think about turning elements into gold, we really have to rethink physical stability itself. I want you to think of an atom not as some static, boring ball just sitting on a table, but as a perpetual, incredibly high-stakes tug-of-war. Powell calls this inherent dualism. On one side of the rope, we have centripetal motion. That's your inward pulling vector, the binding force that creates structural cohesion and concentrates everything at the center. But fighting against it, constantly, is centrifugal motion. That's the outward pushing force responsible for spatial distribution. It's what makes an object actually take up physical volume. So stability, it's not a state of rest at all. It's an active, ongoing, perfectly balanced equilibrium between these two battling motions.
Moving on to part 2, inside the quantum vacuum.
So you might be wondering, where exactly is this microscopic tug-of-war even taking place? Well, traditional science often treats the space between subatomic particles as just a dead, empty void. Nothing to see here. But Paul's space gap hypothesis argues the exact opposite. He states that subatomic spaces require an intrinsic spatial separation that is fully saturated with active electromagnetic vacuum energy. It is definitely not nothingness. This non-empty gap is highly active, and it provides the dynamic degrees of freedom that are absolutely necessary for physical matter to exist, operate, and maintain that constant tug-of-war.
Pell actually maps out this localized energy environment using some very specific mathematical metrics. We've got r, which is the center-to-center distance between particles, and r, the fundamental radius of the particle itself. Then there's rho sub e. That represents the active electromagnetic vacuum energy density. Basically, that's the amount of energetic juice filling up that gap. And finally, v is the total volumetric space. Now, why does all this math matter to us? Because this exact energy environment acts like a cosmic control panel for matter. It dictates exactly how energy transitions from your radiation into a tangible, condensed solid state.
Okay, part 3, building the structural backbone. So how do these inward and outward forces operating inside this energized vacuum actually build the architecture of matter? Well, it all comes down to the structural backbone, or what Powell calls the psi spine. This is absolutely crucial. The backbone is the active pathway of continuous energy flow that makes up the vital axis of a material. You get this mathematical backbone by integrating the net force field over a specific life cycle of time. To put that in plain English, the reason materials are different, like why iron is iron and oxygen is oxygen, is simply because of intrinsic variations in the intensity and the duration of those dual motions. Unique tugs of war create uniquely different materials. If we map out this equilibrium graphically, it's pretty revealing. We see centripetal decay dropping down towards zero, representing that inward energy spread, actively fighting the outward centrifugal decay, which starts at an equal negative value and rises up towards zero. That perfect, fleeting moment of dynamic balance, the exact spot where the net force hits exactly zero right down the middle, that establishes the core structural backbone of stable matter. It's like a state of perfectly balanced tension that's literally holding the physical world together.
Which brings us to part 4, turning copper into gold.
With the mechanics of that backbone established, we can finally get into the really fun stuff, modern, mathematically driven alchemy. Powell makes a pretty bold claim here. He says elements are not immutable, predefined static blocks. Subatomic particles are specific, localized manifestations of condensed energy states. That is a massive paradigm shift. Under this energetic view, protons, neutrons, and electrons aren't these permanent, independent little billiard balls. Instead, they are the direct result of specific frequencies slowing down and condensing within that active vacuum. Think about it. If atoms are just condensed energy states, then the difference between copper, with an atomic number of 29, and gold at 79, isn't about some unbreakable physical barrier. They simply possess distinct baseline structural profiles. We'll call them psi copper and psi gold. These unique profiles only exist because they each have completely different vacuum frequency decay pathways. Copper's internal tug-of-war just settled at one specific frequency and duration to form its backbone, while gold's settled at another entirely different frequency.
Let's look at part 5, the transmutation mechanism.
So if copper and gold are really just two different energetic backbones, how on earth do we change one into the other? Well, Paul lays out a step-by-step mathematical proof for how elemental reconfiguration could theoretically happen, and without chaotic radioactive decay or smashing atoms together in a collider. Step 1 is establishing the baseline structural states, where the net internal force reaches that perfect dynamic balance as duration approaches infinity. Step 2 is defining the structural invariance. That just means calculating the precise unique frequency coefficients that make copper act like copper and gold act like gold. Then comes the magic. Step 3, external modulation. By applying a very specific external electromagnetic resonance field, you can essentially tune the internal frequencies of the copper atom. You shift the dynamic frequency matrix of the vacuum itself, which forces the internal backbone to systematically rewrite itself to match the gold profile.
Let's trace this out chronologically to make it crystal clear. At Unit 1, we start with stable copper. It's just sitting there happily at its baseline energy level. Then, at Unit 2, boom, we introduce the delta pulse. This is that precisely calculated external resonance field being applied. We aren't destroying the atom at all. We are hitting it with a very sharp, targeted energetic wave. Right after this pulse, at Unit 3, the entire system's energy level shifts vertically upward. It reorganizes and stabilizes at a higher energy platform. The subatomic equilibrium has naturally, seamlessly reorganized its structural backbone into stable gold. We've literally tuned the element into a brand new state of being. Finally, part 6, a new energetic paradigm.
Now, I know this is some incredibly thought-provoking theoretical physics, but the reason Gautam Paul's paper is so compelling is because it completely removes the static, rigid constraints of traditional chemistry. It proves that subatomic stability is not a given. It is an actively forged balance. Think about how we do things now in traditional physics. We usually require catastrophic kinetic collisions, like smashing particles together at near light speed, just to change matter. Paul is offering a resonance-driven alternative. It provides a scalable, theoretical foundation for non-destructive elemental transmutation. We could potentially achieve advanced energy-matter conversion simply by tuning the frequencies of the universe.
I want to leave you with a final thought to chew on today. If an external electromagnetic resonance can systematically rewrite the internal backbone of elements, what are the true limits of material reality? If solid matter is just an energetic habit that can be retuned by applying the right frequency, our physical world might be far more flexible and far more connected than we ever dared to imagine. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep questioning the universe.